it's another step towards this transparency that I really want to achieve. And that when you walk into the restaurant, you just know that everything is thoughtfully sourced. We thought about every single thing in there.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you another story. Our sugar. Janie did a lot of research, and she was like, like if we source sugar from this place, they literally like drive vehicles up on these piles of sugar. And she's like, I did all this research and I'm not into it. And then we found this one source of this unrefined organic cane sugar, for making desserts and so forth. Sugar, we use it. And so we found out how to get it, and it's kind of hard. And interestingly enough, the only place we could get it is Walmart, and they'll deliver it. And so, every once in a while, this truck shows up from Walmart and just drops all this sugar off at the restaurant. And it's interesting because, you think Walmart, maybe, forgive me, but maybe low quality, or maybe not in keeping with our standards. But that was where we found it, and it's like, that's where we wound up. And I remember one time we were getting this delivery and this guy saw it and he walked by, he started taking pictures like he's doing an expose. And it kind of made me, a little upset, because I'm like, what you think you see is actually the complete opposite of what you see. Like, you're not busting us. You're actually just exposing the level that Janie has gone through to make sure that every ingredient that's on your plate is really good.
Yes.
And it just happens to come from Walmart, man. Like, that was not done lightly.
Right.
It's like, I was like, go ahead and post it and like call me out. Please let me tell this story if you want. Nothing ever came of that, but I remember thinking, like, it's a very nuanced world out there, and trying to find the best ingredients. You never know. And if you start poking around, you might find out some very disturbing things about where your food comes from.
Oh my gosh. I would never even think about just the sugar quality, and that intuitively makes so much sense. And I think we need as a country restaurants like you guys that really don't compromise on anything, where the quality of food is so good, it's so well sourced, it's really like a labor of love, and then the food is just absolutely delicious too. Like that, is it the Chipotle mayo that you guys serve with the fries? We always get the extra Chipotle mayo because it's so good. You don't even realize that mayo should or can taste that good.
Right. We're buying peppers in season and smoking them and drying them too, so there's so many layers to that, so we're not buying Chipotles. We make our own. We buy red jalapenos and smoke them and dehydrate them. And we make our own paprika, which is one of somebody asked me recently, it's like, what is your favorite thing? And I was like, oh, it's paprika. Like, what? I'm like, yeah, we buy several 100 pounds of thick-walled Hungarian peppers. We smoke them over post oak and then dehydrate them. And then as needed, we grind them to a powder. And, with, apologies to Spain and Hungary, some of the best paprika in the world. I think it's just, it's magical. It smells chocolatey and smoky, and it's really cool. And it's this ingredient that maybe has been lurking around in the back of your cabinet. It's just this cakey red, stale, flavorless mass. And it's like, or it could be this. But it's just another one of those things that as an employee, when you sprinkle paprika on something and you've seen the team, in August and September laboring to make that stuff, you don't just toss it on there. You understand that that's a dehydrated pepper that came from that nice lady, who carried every one of those cases in herself, and that whole process. And then the guy who dropped the firewood off, that's the only other ingredient that went in there. It's like just this respect for all these little nuanced ingredients. I think it's just really, really cool that, you can dive as deep as you want into this stuff.
That's so cool.
Yeah, the way you're describing the level of detail that you guys are going into to source and create all the ingredients, raw materials, makes me think that probably reframes how you guys think about food waste, and just like when it comes to food that needs to get thrown away, it's probably hurts that much more because you guys are going through and making sure stuff's coming from the right places.
Yeah. Janie says all the time, in the kitchen, she says everything is expensive. And it's true, because it's like we're not using everything we use is it's expensive for a reason. Not that it's a luxury ingredient, but because it's coming from people that need to feed their kids and keep their farms open and stuff like that. So they're paid an equitable rate. And so waste hurts, and we go to great lengths not to waste anything, whether it's compost or whether we're feeding bread scraps to chickens that we'll then get eggs from, we'll try to utilize everything, but out of necessity, and there's no escaping the financial aspect of this, like this is not a 501c3, we want to pay our employees as well as we can. We want to provide them insurance. We want to throw them a party every once in a while. We want to buy them pizza on a busy day. We want people to stay there for 10 years, which they have.
Wow.
We want our farmers to be equitably treated. So it's a really hard wire to walk, when it comes to the financials of it too, because you have to you don't want to be seen as a super fancy restaurant. You want to be sustainable financially, just like you want your farmers to be sustainable financially. So yeah, these products cost more, and that forces a utilization. That's one driving factor to force utilization and not wasting anything, along with that incumbent standard of these things everything is precious. So waste stings, but over time you figure out better ways and develop better systems to deal with it.
I think when you go into the restaurant, your eyes just so naturally gravitate towards just like the overfire cooking setup that you guys have. Was that when Dai Due was, when you're going from the supper club concept to brick and mortar restaurant, did you know from day one, like, we need to find a way to just build this over the fire cooking setup indoors? Because I don't think I've ever seen that in another restaurant before.
Sure, there's places that are doing it now. I'm not saying, again, not to imply, over the fire cooking, we invented it.
Invented by Jesse Griffiths.
But in a restaurant, I've seen Fire Door on Netflix.
Sure.
That guy.
Oh yeah, I mean, beautiful places like that. Yes, we always cooked over fire at the dinners, or when possible. Sometimes we'd be in a hotel kitchen and we just had to deal with it. We'd change the menu, but fire being a huge part of it. Fire also being a huge part of our cultural approach to food. We are in what has historically been a big forest, a big oak forest, a big oak and pecan forest. And then when you go south, we're in a big mesquite forest. So, there is that aspect too. I think it is appropriate to cook over fire here. That's how barbecue happened. It's like, it's really cool. And why barbecue doesn't necessarily exist in Ontario, I mean, where like that style of cooking or preservation is as necessary as it is here. In designing the restaurant, we wanted to tell a really short story when you walked in the door, and that you come in, the first thing you see is a counter. There's currently a bunch of beef rib rolls in there aging. Beyond that is a table where people are making food, prepping food. And there's a rail, the butcher rail. Mm-hmm. The people at the table are prepping bread and desserts. They're making sauces. They're also cutting up a pig. It's all happening at that table. And so that everybody knows, there's no area in the back of the restaurant where that happens. Every single prep item is prepped there. It's meant to be not like a theater, but it's meant to provide transparency. Like we have nothing to hide about what's going on, and or not hide. We're proud of the entire process. You might walk in there and maybe somebody's put off by someone taking a cleaver to a side of pork, but that's how the pork chops happen, you know? And so it's in all these processes. Beyond that is a fire. So far you've come in, you've seen a cut of meat, people cutting meat, and a fire. And my concept pitch is done. Like it's like
This is like heaven for the Meat Mafia
right.
podcast.
I don't have any more explaining to do. You've already
yeah.
figured it out. Like the old man said, I know what you're doing here.
Yeah.
You know, and that's it. And then there's crocks full of in season. They're in potatoes. There's tomatoes laid out on sheet trays because we don't refrigerate our tomatoes. They come in. And the only place that we have in the whole restaurant is just right there. We're not showing them off. We just don't have another place to put them.
Yeah.
You know, and, you know, other fruit might be ripening. There's definitely something fermenting, I mean, on purpose, somewhere in there in a crock or more likely in a 50-gallon bin. There's some huge batch of sauerkraut or kimchi going. There's jars of dried peppers. There's a little bit of retail space. And then there's a place to sit down and have all that. And then there's a bar. And then there's the wine and there's the beer and done. And then beyond that, in the back of the restaurant is a walk-in that will never be big enough. And an office that will certainly never be big enough. And a dish pit. It's actually kind of roomy.
The way you're describing, I'm like, I can't imagine where this actually is in the restaurant.
Yeah, it's and that's it. I've described the entirety of it. There's an ice machine back there, but the only thing that you don't see is the dish pit, the boring stuff that happens on the computer, and the big place where we keep the stuff cold. That's it.
What's changed in your philosophy around food since you started Dai Due until today?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, I think that I've mellowed. You're young, maybe a little too idealistic or opinionated. I feel like things are better when you're open and not judgmental. I used to be very hardcore, like, I'm not going to eat any meat unless it is like this. But I think more than that, I really appreciate, like, I've been so fortunate to witness these other entities grow in like a business way, like farms that have gone from small farms to medium-sized farms. Farm to Table, who has really enabled the serving of locally produced foods because they made it very convenient, and that is key.
Yeah,
that wholesale, that distribution model. You can get milk and apples and all kinds of vegetables and some meats and all this stuff from them delivered tomorrow morning. That's been really cool to see that happen. And things like an appreciation for HEB, like a great company. Now, do they serve a bunch of non-locals or sell a bunch of of course, yes. I mean, but you know what they also quietly do is sell a ton of really good local produce. From larger producers, but it's affecting the landscape in a really beneficial way, I think. It's still promoting farming. A lot of organics. Like just today at Central Market, I bought okra, red onions, cucumbers, and mushrooms, all locally grown from Central Market, HEB. Pretty cool. And that was not even everything that they had available, So an appreciation for these huge models that are incorporating those kind of things in there and really helping that whole food system quite a bit, in my opinion. I mean, I could be wrong about that, but I'd say that I just like an appreciation of wherever we can make strides is beneficial.
Yeah, it's like we can't just immediately
No.
flip the model on its head. You got to solve for feeding people at scale versus these constant improvements like you're talking about.
Yeah.
I think that HEB story is great because I guarantee you there's probably a ton of people locally around the country that just assume that every piece of food you're putting into your mouth is something you've hunted or something from a farmer's market. I think that's really encouraging that, go to Central Market and get some great food and vegetables and meat.
Yeah. Well, I've got a kid too. So, I mean, bananas,
Yes.
and I mean, we really try. I mean, the protein, I've got that wrapped up. I've got a lot of deer and hog and fish in the freezer. But the other stuff, I mean, sure, it's cool. Don't feel, guilt or anything, but just make those strides.